What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a new first impressions on the new Season 8 Fury Thief, Zhao. He is a very unique Fury Thief. He has a very unique model that we haven't seen before in other of the previous Fury Thieves in the older seasons. And it makes him a very interesting character to use, especially because there are multiple ways you can actually sort of exploit his Fury mechanics. So I'm going to go into Jolyon really quickly, but before I do, I just want to say thank you to Dusty and DM for lending me their account. I don't have Zhao on my account, but they do have it on their account, and so they lent me their account. And this is all possible thanks to them, because a Fury Thief is kind of difficult to test in preview because the Fury is reset after every turn, and you'll see why this is an issue to test Zhao Yun's skill a little bit later when we dive into his skill. So first off, he is, like I said before, a Fury Thief from Season 8. He is a Spear user, and he's a multi-target Fury Thief, excuse me, at that. And he works similarly to your typical multi-target Fury Thief on his initial skill, but the turns after he applies his initial skill, that's when things start to get interesting. So his initial skill steals Fury just like any other multi-target Fury Thief. You can think of this as Claire because they're both column Fury Thieves, and you should expect similar Fury gains to Claire when you're using his initial skill. The difference is that after he uses his initial skill, he actually applies a Fury dot, and it steals Fury over time. Now, normally a dot, which stands for damage over time, it deals damage over time. It's exactly what it sounds like. But this is a Fury dot, which means that instead of dealing damage over time, it actually steals Fury over time. So I guess we should be calling it Thought. But that's basically what it does. And he has the same mechanics as PA and Michael, in which that once you use a skill, he can't use a skill again until a certain number of turns or until his self buff is removed. Now this poses a little bit of a problem for Zhao that PA and Michael don't have, simply because PA and Michael both have self buffs, and that's it. As soon as their self buff either wears out or is removed, they can use their skill again. However, Zhao Yun's skill, which is the Fury Dot, it's a debuff, and it's applied towards the enemy. So if the enemy cleanses the debuff, then Zhao can only use his normal attack, and he can't really steal Fury for the next few turns, either 3 or 2 or 1 turn. So that is a minor inconvenience, but I don't think it's a huge problem, because Zhao is not meant to replace your single target Fury Thieves. He's not meant to be the primary Fury Thief on your team. He's, in my opinion, meant to replace some of your weaker or less useful multi-target Fury Thieves like Belore or Nicki or Hyrule. So that's basically how his skill works. Now, his damage is not terrible. It's at 3.5 times, which is a little bit less than, I think, Prince Arthur or Michael. I think they both go up to 4 times. I don't remember the exact number, but he ranges somewhere around there. But because he doesn't have the guaranteed critical like Prince Arthur does, he will be dealing less damage unless he's in the vicinity of a critical buff. But his damage is still very stable because he is using a spear weapon. But I don't want to go into his damage that much because it's his Fury model that's much more interesting. So I'm going to do a little bit of live testing right now. I already have an idea of how much Fury you get and how it works, simply because I already tested it. But I think a live testing is a good way to demonstrate how his skill works. So his skill on the initial turn, it's going to act exactly the same as your typical multi-target Fury Thief. If you steal more, or if you hit more targets rather, you steal more Fury. The fewer targets you hit, the less Fury you'll get. So this means that if you're hitting 4 targets, you're going to expect a reasonable amount of Fury. If you're hitting 2 or 1 target, you should expect to actually lose Fury, because that's not the purpose of a multi-target Fury Thief. Now, after you apply a skill, a Fury Dot is then applied. Now the problem with this is that using this on mobs is actually difficult, because often you're gonna end up killing the mob within 1 or 2 turns, and so you can't actually maximize the efficiency of your Fury Dot, because at most it'll last 1 turn and you can only gain that extra fury from that one turn. As soon as the mob dies, you won't be able to gain any more fury anymore. So for mobs, typically don't recommend using his skill because it's just not that useful. All you get is a typical multi-target Fury Thief, and you are kind of locked out of your skill for the next 2 or 3 turns. So in that case, on mobs, the skill is not that great. However, his skill particularly shines on bosses and any enemies that have lots of HP, because as the turns go on, you can actually maximize the number of turns that the Fury Dot is applied. And so if it lasts for 3 turns, you're actually applying it for 3 turns and you're maximizing the amount of fury you're gaining. So very good for Mythic Raid because obviously the boss has a lot of HP, and quite possibly very useful for Explore as well because some of the battles tend to be longer or drawn out. So Zhao works pretty well in Mythic Raid. And I haven't tested it in Explore because again, this isn't my account, but I suspect he is still very useful in Explore as well. So I'm going to quickly run through these mobs because the main focus of this is to test on the boss. And I'm not sure if I used the skill before, but you saw that the Fury Steel on multiple targets, I think it was like 3 targets. It wasn't terrible. It's pretty normal for your regular multi-target Fury Thief, so it's not too bad. Now I gotta find a way. Oh, I don't think. Oh wait, I just want to get rid of these trash mobs. Okay, so how I would think of Zhao's Fury Dot is similar to like a summon, somewhat similar to Arena or Adriel. You can pretend that there's an invisible summon at the end of every turn that steals fury for you. Basically, at the end of every turn, you can imagine that this hidden / invisible summon will go to the boss and steal some fury. And in essence, that's exactly how the Fury Dot works. And the enemy does in fact have a fury pool, even though we can't see it. So what this means is that the more attacks you hit on the enemy, the more skills you use, the more fury the enemy gets. However, at the end of every turn, the invisible summon, aka the Fury Dot, will return all of that fury back onto your fury pool. So it's kind of like a positive feedback loop. The more attacks you do, the more fury you get back. Now, of course, this is capped at a maximum of 400 fury per turn. Otherwise, it would be far too broken and you would just steal all the fury. But 400 fury per turn for basically using no fury is actually very good, especially when you're actually using more skills to keep up that 400 fury. Typically, when you have low fury, you're kind of stuck between, do I use my Fury Thief or do I save that amount of fury for my stronger heroes to deal some more damage? In this case with Zhao, as long as the Fury Dot is applied, you don't actually have to worry about applying the Fury Thief skill because the dot is already there. You can just focus on using your heroes and dealing damage. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead and attack the mobs. Remember that the enemy all shares the same fury pool, so regardless if I attack the boss or if I hit the mobs, it doesn't really matter. I'm only hitting the mobs because I don't want to accidentally kill the boss, because this is of course a level, like this is the first stage of bounty hunt. I don't want to actually like kill it by accident. So I'm just gonna do regular normal attacks. Hopefully he heals. I believe this boss heals. Yeah, he does heal. Okay. So I'm gonna use Zhao's skill, and you see that the initial fury return on less than 4 targets is not that great, which is again, like I said, typical. But take a close look at what happens after. That was from 1054 fury, from 654, excuse me, to 1054. That's 400 fury, and that's simply just by attacking the boss. And now I think I should be able to just simply attack the boss, and I don't think it'll kill it. You can simply just continuously attack the boss, and you'll always gain 400 fury per turn as long as the boss has that much fury. So obviously the more you attack, the more fury the boss gets, and then at the end of every turn, the summon will return that amount of fury for you, which is capped at 400. So this model actually works very well. It means that you can actually spam a lot of your skills and gain fury at the same time, which is, I think, very crazy if you think about it. It's very unique for sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and use some more skills, and because I used so many skills and the Fury Dot is still there, I should return at least 400. And there we go. We went from 253 to 653 Fury. Now imagine pairing this with a single target Fury Thief like Husky, who can steal the Fury at the beginning of the turn and get you enough Fury for you to use your skills. And then you apply Zhao's skill and then have all your heroes give the enemy more Fury, and then at the end of your turn, get all that Fury that you gave to the enemy back to your side. It's kind of, it really is like a positive feedback loop, which is amazing. So that's why I think Zhao is actually a very good um, Fury Thief. At the very least, he's going to be replacing your standard multi-target Fury Thieves like Belore or Nicki. Because even if you don't consider the dot, they will steal roughly the same amount of Fury. But the dot actually extends the Fury much more compared to the regular multi-target Fury Thieves. So Zhao is, in my opinion, fantastic, and he's a really great hero. There is no reason to like throw him away or use him as transcending fodder. Absolutely keep him. And this is just like one way that I think you can use Zhao. I'm sure there are other ways, but this by far seems the most simple. It's simply just attacking and just using Zhao's skill. And it doesn't really matter whether you use Zhao's skill at the beginning of the turn or the end of the turn, because the summon will always, or the quote-unquote summon, will always steal Fury at the end of the turn, so it doesn't really matter. So that's pretty much all I have to say about Zhao. His Fury mechanic, like the model of his Fury gain, is actually very good. Um, I'm hoping we see more of these creative ways to get Fury, like different Fury Thieves instead of your typical, single target, multi-target. This actually brings something interesting to the table. So I do recommend Zhao. If you get him, definitely keep him. There's absolutely nothing wrong with him. I can definitely see him being a monster in Mythic Raid, because in Mythic Raid you have 15 heroes. So that means you have more Fury to deal to the enemy, and I believe the Fury pool is also increased. Like the cap is at 2,000 in Mythic Raid, if I remember correctly. So it actually means you're able to reach that maximum 400 Fury gain every turn more easily. I did a little bit of testing in Mythic Raid, and it seems to be consistent 400 Fury per turn because there are so many heroes attacking. So that's really, really good. Now, that's pretty much it for Zhao. However, I do want to talk about the new Mythic hero that was released alongside Zhao, which was Indra, the God of Thunder. Now, she is very similar to Lacita, except like a mythical version. They both are gun users. They both have an attack buff. They both deal increased damage to bosses, albeit Lacita has that via a mythic skill and Indra has that in her normal skill. They both decrease defense. However, Indra does not have a stun, so it actually does get applied most of the time. And instead of hitting in a column, she hits in a cross. And her mythic skill is slightly different. It boosts attack for gun heroes. So that's pretty much it for Indra. Very similar to Lacita. However, if we look at her skill, it's actually not that close, simply because the attack buff is not that great at level 50. If you look at her skill right now, her attack buff only goes up to 25% at level 50, and at level 100, it only goes up to 50%, which is, in my opinion, not that great if you compare it to some of the other mythic heroes that have 75% attack boosts. For example, Rag, or Gabriel with the costume, or DQK. All of those have very high levels of attack boosts, and Indra does not. And the increased damage dealt to bosses is capped at 30%. However, when we look at Indra's costume, it changes her drastically. Her defense debuff goes up to 75%, her attack boost goes up to 75%, her damage increase to bosses gets increased to 75%, which is not seen, I think, in any hero as of now. The cap, I believe, is 50% at level 4 myth skill. Myth skill. I bit my own tongue. And that's absolutely amazing. And on top of that, she has a 0.3% critical damage increase per level, which means that at level 100, it's going to be a 30% increase to critical damage. So you pair her with any critical buffer, she's going to be dealing massive amounts of damage in PvE. And this is especially important because she hits in a cross. Now, it's debatable whether a cross is better than a column or a row, because in a cross, the damage is higher on the selected targets, but it's lower around the surrounding targets. So if I target this little frog here, you'll see that they restored HP of 116 on the surrounding targets, but 166 on the initial target. So when you're hitting multiple targets, you're actually dealing less damage with the cross. But with the advantage of a cross is that you're dealing more damage on your selected target, and in PvE, you're often hitting a boss, and that's considered one target despite how many tiles they take up. So you're actually dealing increased damage to a boss when you're using a cross attack versus if you're using a column attack. Column and rows are typically more suited to PvP because they remain constant along the entire row, but in PvE, the cross is much more useful because it's considered one target regardless of how many tiles, and a cross simply has higher SDF compared to columns and rows. So all of these traits together, along with her costume, make her a very strong PvE hero. But because her costume is not available right now, I would not suggest getting her. If you do plan on getting her, I would wait until her costume is released, because as of now, she is quite lackluster. Um, she's not the worst myth hero, I think, but she definitely has room for improvement, and that's where the costume comes in. So that's my take on Indra. If you're gonna get her, I would wait until her costume comes out, because as of now, there are a few mythic heroes that can outclass her. So that's pretty much it for these two heroes. Peace.